Well, Meg, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're more than welcome. So, my understanding is you're a conventional doctor that flipped over to the functional medicine world. I think there might be a story there. What
Yes.
what made you turn into a functional medicine doctor?
Yes. So I actually graduated with a PharmD, so a doctor of pharmacology, and then I did a residency after that. And so I was practicing in clinics and doing ambulatory care settings and doing like med management and doing different things throughout my career. And I kept seeing people be put on more and more medications. So they were put on more medications and they were really not getting better. They were more just surviving rather than thriving. And I could see this kind of happen over and over again where, we're using medicine and we're not really changing things. And you're just sort of in this, cycle. And then at the same time, I was having some of my own personal health issues. And I was having some GI issues. I was getting the IBS label, we don't know we don't know what's wrong with you. And I couldn't even eat without feeling sick. And I was going to different gastroenterologists. And it wasn't until I really learned about functional medicine and started digging in and really looking at the microbiome and making some changes and then started to treat myself that I actually finally felt better after years and years of not feeling well. And so I was like, oh, I have to make a change. I really want to bring this to more people. And so I actually, went back to get certified in functional medicine, went back to get for more education, and then opened up a functional medicine practice. So now I practice in functional medicine as a practitioner, and I see people all over the world in a virtual practice.
Wonderful. Yes, it certainly is better to thrive rather than to survive and to actually
Yes, it
identify
certainly is.
and treat the underlying cause rather than putting a band-aid on top of things.
Yes.
So you have a specialty in headaches and migraines. What led you out of all the different health complaints? Why headaches and migraines?
I know it's it is kind of like because I know it's usually like the personal journey. And while I've had migraines, it wasn't necessarily my personal journey that brought me in. But once I opened my practice, I kept seeing this pattern where I would see women particularly women, come to me over and over again, either with headaches and migraines that they'd been living with for so long and really not getting resolved, or they also were coming to me for other things. And I do a really detailed intake questionnaire when we come in. And I just kept noticing this pattern that they would answer that they've been having like headaches for their whole life or for so many years, like weekly or monthly or, often. And that wasn't even their chief complaint. They were just normalizing it. They just felt like this is just something I have to live with. It's just who I am. There's no solution. And so once we'd work together, even if they were coming to me for that reason, or even for these other reasons, they'd start to say, I can't even believe this. My headaches are gone. This is amazing. And this has changed my life. And I really started to think, we need to make a difference here because this is just being normalized most often in conventional medicine. We're just treating the pain. We're not really looking into the underlying root causes. We can put all these pieces together and see this difference. And so I really started to dive in and focus on helping people in this area.
I guess it's also an area where you can still survive putting a band-aid on. Like it's so easy to go over the counter and to get something so that you can cope with today. But really, you're causing downstream problems by continuing just to take over-the-counter pain medications. So I love that you offer a solution so that women don't have to put up with that anymore, that they can wake up with a clear mind and keep a clear head all day. And not
Yes.
need to reach for something over the counter. So what do you find are some of the main underlying causes of headaches?
So one of the things I think what we need to do is start kind of putting pieces together. So one of the things that we need to start to places that I see often is food. So I start having people look at their diet, and foods can be complicated when it comes to headaches because it's not always foods that you feel that aren't good for you. So we're now pretty aware of some of the inflammatory foods and some things that we should be cutting out, but it can be really complicated here because they can be good foods. They can be things like avocados or citrus foods that have different components that can cause the headaches or the migraines. And so what we start to do, so some of those food groups can be things like histamine containing foods. And you want to think of like fermented foods there. You want to think of tyramine containing foods. Those are like aged and cured foods. We want to look at salicylates, which would be more of those citrus foods. We want to look at things that have MSG, which would be like packaged processed foods, aspartame in diet sodas, things like that. We want to look at all of those food groups. Now, when we also look at those, there is also this aspect of threshold. So I think it can be confusing because sometimes you could say, oh, I'm eating this food and I get the migraine, but then I eat it again and I didn't. So it's probably not that food, but it could be that food in still a combination with some other foods that are putting you over the threshold or something else that's going on that's putting you over that threshold. And, you're just discounting it. Like, okay, because I don't get it every time, it's not contributing. So something I have people do is start to print out a blank calendar and then write down when they get the headaches. If they write down what you ate that day and the day before, and then just start to look for patterns. You can start to see like, okay, people, it's so interesting. Sometimes, like I said, it can be lemons, it could be olives, it could be peanuts, it could be, there's just so many foods that come up that start to show a pattern for people once they start doing that. Now, don't get discouraged if you don't see a pattern. There are a lot of pieces to this puzzle and it can be a lot of different things, but that's an easy place to start. Another really simple place to start is hydration, because we do know that dehydration is an independent risk factor for headaches. And are you getting enough water? Are you getting hydrated at a cellular level? So we want to make sure that we're sipping our water through the day, potentially maybe adding like some sea salt or electrolytes so that you're really getting hydration at that cellular level and
Thank
really
you for
focusing there.
saying
It
thank you
is.
for saying electrolytes. I am a
Yes.
massive big fan of electrolytes, and I think I haven't met a woman yet who hasn't benefited from just adding a dose of electrolytes. And I say clean electrolytes, so no colors, flavors, preservatives, just a concentrate that you add to some water daily. Like, I'm yet to meet a woman who hasn't noticed positive changes from that alone. So
Yes,
sorry,
it's
I interrupted
interesting.
you.
Yeah, no, that's it. But it's interesting that you say that because I just ran out of my electrolytes and I have them on order. And I got a package this morning and I was like, oh, it's not the electrolytes. So it was like my body is not like, I want them back. So it like, isn't that interesting that you're saying that? And the signal is like, okay, I'm just used to that in my pattern. And so your body's asking for it because it is beneficial for a lot of us.
Yeah, well, every cell in your body benefits from being hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of that there'd be very little that would be more important than hydration. So that extra water and the electrolytes. So ladies, if you don't have an electrolyte in your routine, why not try it for 7 days? See how you feel
Mm-hmm.
at the end of those 7 days. And I do put a caution in there. And if your doctor has told you to be in a low sodium or a low potassium diet, maybe just check in with your healthcare team because they know you better than we do. But if you haven't been told that, give it a go and then let us know how fantastic you feel afterwards, because it's not just headaches that can lessen. You may be sleeping
Mhm.
better, you may have better energy, better clarity of thought. These are all wonderful things.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry, keep going with some of your
Yeah, that's
possible
okay. No,
causes of
that's yeah.
headaches.
So yeah, and aim, I try to say aim maybe about half your, but the general aspect is about half your body weight in water daily. That's like in ounces of water daily. I mean, just to make sure that you're getting that and that you're getting the electrolytes, that you're sipping your water through the day so you're not excreting. And I think a lot of us actually get like we're not drinking and then we're like, oh, I'm so thirsty, and you go chug a big glass of water, but it's not really the optimal way to drink because then you could be excreting that water because you're drinking it all at once. So really focusing on keeping that water with you through the day so that you can stay hydrated.
When you were talking about food, I find that it's not just foods that you've been eating in the last couple of days. It can also sometimes be withdrawal from certain foods. So if we think
Mhm.
about caffeine, how a caffeine withdrawal can give us a headache, and how sugar withdrawals, if you've ever tried to come off all sugars in your diet, more than likely you're going to have headache as your
A
body
headache.
processes and responds to that. And we've got hangovers and things like that. So sometimes it's not what you're consuming, it's what you haven't consumed that you regularly consume.
Yeah, so you can look at those patterns too. Caffeine's an interesting one because caffeine is actually used to treat headaches and some medications like Excedrin. And so there can be benefits. Sometimes you can actually, caffeine can make your headache feel better when you're drinking it. If if you have the headache, but you get that rebound headache, what you're saying, that withdrawal from the caffeine, then it actually makes the headache worse. So it's a, really a slippery slope sometimes. And then yes, definitely the withdrawal. And even when you're saying the sugar, the other aspect you can also get is when you have hypoglycemia can give you a headache. So when your blood sugar is too low. So sometimes when you're having so much sugar in your diet and your insulin goes up and then you don't have, your blood sugar drops too low, we can get the headache too. So it's really putting all these things in order. Another component with food is food sensitivity. So you can have individual food sensitivities also that are unique to you that are causing inflammation and an immune response, and then that can also be contributing to your headaches too.
Which is so wonderful. There's practitioners like you to help
Yeah.
hold people's hands and guide them through, because it's not an easy process and it can be overwhelming for some. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Oh, sure.
So you mentioned histamine foods, and we know that at perimenopause, estrogen levels can rise, and that higher estrogen levels can promote issues with histamine. What are some of the main histamine foods that you see being problematic?
I think one of the ones that is the most surprising to people is avocados, because we're often told that we should, be eating those because they're healthy fats. And so I feel like that has become in like a lot of people's diets. So, and another one is bananas. We don't think of bananas as being, potentially a problem with histamines. Also things like tomatoes, a lot of beans can have histamines. You can have histamines in chocolate. So, that's where it gets a little bit complicated here, where you're thinking like, okay, my smoothie isn't something I'm thinking could be giving me a headache, but maybe you're putting bananas in there and maybe, that's a issue. So there's, it's really dialing into some of those in histamines in particular can be complicated because, there's foods that contain histamine. There's foods that can make your body release histamine. So there's all these different food lists then that's why, like, when you do work with someone, it's like getting those clear guidances of like what you should do. Another tip that I don't think a lot of people know is that leftovers also can contain histamine. So even if your food doesn't have histamine in it, it can grow in your food if, after it's cooked and you're letting it sit in your refrigerator. So meal prep can be great for so many people, but not necessarily great for people that have headaches.
My understanding is if you freeze leftovers, the histamine doesn't rise. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that would be a better option to do. So if if you're going to do meal prep, then making sure that you're freezing the foods.
Yeah. I love batch cooking. For me, it just works with
Mhm.
my life. Busy lifestyle. I
Yes.
want to know that I've got a beautiful home cooked, nutritious meal
Mhm.
that I can then freeze so that I've got meals for days where I'm working late. So it's good to know that it's safe to freeze it, but if I leave it in the fridge, then it's going to increase in histamine over time. What about nutritional changes? Because I know sometimes it's high nutrient levels, like too much iron, or low nutrient levels, like not enough magnesium. How else
Yeah.
do you see nutrients involved with headaches?
Yeah, so I think one of the most common things that that we see is the low magnesium. There is a high, I do see a high correlation of people, not all, but high, our magnesium, our soil isn't as rich in magnesium as it used to be either. So we
Yeah.
don't get as much magnesium as we used to from foods. And so we have this low, a lot of people are low in magnesium anyway, but that is probably the biggest one I see. You also want to look at things like your B vitamins, their people can have an MTHFR genetic variant where you're not processing, folate as well. And sometimes we need the B vitamins also I'm going to take a step deeper, but, to process the estrogen. So there's an estrogenic component to, particularly to hormonal migraines. And so then we need to make sure that we're methylating for like our toxicity and for estrogen metabolism. So getting enough B vitamins, omega-3 fatty acids are important. So things like salmon can be great. And riboflavin is another one that's often low in people with migraines. So getting things that have riboflavin in them can be helpful.
Just because we're an international podcast, some people know riboflavin as B2. So just thought I
Yes.
would put that out there, that it can be called either or. Do you use herbs? Because I quite love turmeric.
I do. Yeah. The people always say, well, what do I do if I have the headache? And I use turmeric a lot for, anti-inflammatory. I do like that. I do love turmeric too. Yeah. So, that's too, like, that can be a great anti-inflammatory if you're trying to get off something like an NSAID, like an ibuprofen or something like that. You can try to use something like that. I also will recommend essential oils too, like a peppermint or
That is.
rosemary. Putting those on your temples can be real, particularly peppermint can be helpful for a lot of people too.
Hmm. I have a belief that it helps to work as a team, to have a team approach to your health. So I quite often refer out to chiropractors, and
Mhm.
especially when you're looking at headaches and migraines, just the whole structural component, the neck
Yes.
tension, whether it's TMJ, whether it's jaw related. Do you see that correlation as well?
I do. Yes. Yes. So I think like I do run a program specifically for headaches and migraines called Headstrong. And part of that, we're looking at all of these triggers. We're looking at aligning your health, thriving, but we also do, look at structure, talk about structure, about, the chiropractic part, just the muscle, the TMJ, the muscle structure, because there's so much tension. I don't think you can ignore that when it comes to headaches, because they're, and I can even tell when my neck gets hit, I feel that in the back of that's actually where mine usually starts, is like that back of my neck where my head, the base of my skull. And then you can feel it kind of coming up the back of your head because you're getting that tightness and from stress and from posture.
And I guess when you've got the headache diary that you've suggested at the beginning, that if you can see there's a pattern, maybe your headaches always start first thing in the morning and you've got a dodgy pillow and you're waking with a sore neck, or it's at the end of a work day when you've been on a screen all day, it can help to sort of go, okay, well, so if you've never been to a chiropractor, to at least go and get an assessment
Mm-hmm.
to see if there's something that you can do there, because it can be such a simple strategy that doesn't require supplements or changes in diet. There will be a population that will benefit greatly from
Benefit.
that, although it won't be everyone. Were there any
Yes,
other?
especially if you feel neck pain. I think if you feel neck pain and tightness, that it's definitely worth getting checked out, chiropractor, maybe even a massage too.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just realized that some places see osteopaths. In Australia, I think we
Mhm.
have predominantly chiropractors. I know in the US you have both osteopaths and chiropractors. So for me, I just want someone to structurally check you out. I don't mind who you go and see. And if you've got a favorite osteopath, please don't be turned off. Don't go and find a chiropractor. Stick to your osteopath if they're the ones that you know and love. Um,
Yes.
what else do you see?
Yeah, so often I see hormones. So we're going to look at the most common thing that when we look at hormones is estrogen dominance or rapid change in hormones. So you want to look at, are you getting a migraine the week before your period? Are you, getting it during ovulation? Do you have, like, through the perimenopause, menopause, pregnancy, all these places where we have these hormonal changes? Are they worse? Are they better? How are your hormones up? Because there really is a strong connection with our hormones. And so then I also don't, it's interesting because when it comes to headaches, we talk about estrogen dominance, but when we look at estrogen dominance, we need to look at all the factors. So, is it low progesterone? Or is it the way you're metabolizing estrogen? Because I don't actually always see a high level of estrogen. I often actually see the estrogen not being metabolized down the right pathways. Then we really want to have our estrogen in a way that we use it and then lose it. And if you're not metabolizing estrogen correctly, then you're going to get these metabolites that can be more proliferative and can have more effects. And so sometimes it's just about really making sure that you're metabolizing estrogen in the right way, rather than even reducing it. So I think sometimes people can go to like, oh, it's, too much estrogen, which, it can be, but it's also all about just really balance with your other hormones. So, in that case, we do testing and we look at what your levels of all your different hormones are, and then what your metabolites are. And then we can actually push them down the pathways that we want in a way that's safe. I don't recommend supplementing for hormones unless you have testing, generally, because it's all about balance. And you could just really I do see people throw themselves out of balance in different ways when they're just guessing instead of actually kind of really getting it figured out.
Yeah, I have a bucket theory, and that is through life, if we look at ourselves as a bucket that holds water, we have different things that puncture your bucket as you age, and you lose water, you lose your vitality. And it might be that hormones have punched a big hole in your bucket, but if you haven't also addressed the other holes, so the nutritional deficiencies, the dietary factors, the environmental factors, the lifestyle factors, all the other factors, you're still going to have a leaky bucket that's losing water. So I'm not pro hormones, I'm not anti hormones. I'm about looking at that woman sitting in front of me to see what's causing the water to leak out of her bucket. And so I do like that. You also do the same thing. You're not just going, right, it's a hormonal related headache. Let's give you some hormones. You're actually taking a step back and saying, well, let's test first. Let's have a look at the
Yes.
whole picture so that I can look at you as an individual woman and how I can patch up your hole, so, patch up your bucket so that you have, the best of health on all levels.
Yeah, I always say that's like the thing you get the side effects of, when we're looking at this in this functional way, the side effects are more, instead of like the drug side effects, you're getting more energy, you're getting better digestion, you're getting the right nutrients. So, we're really, like you're saying, treating that whole person and looking at, because it usually isn't just one thing.
Mm.
It's usually not like, oh, like you're saying, oh, it's just your food, or oh, you're just dehydrated, or oh, you just have a hormone, but it's most often about the connection of different things and putting all those pieces in the right place. One person I was working with is like, she said, it's kind of like we're working on one of those sliding puzzles and we're moving all the pieces and then, in the right direction. I'm like, that's a good analogy. I like it, because we're putting all the pieces in the right places so that your body's calm, because your headache's signaling something going on. And we often too much see it as like, oh, it's a brain issue, but it's really a whole body issue. And when we look at it and take that whole body approach and put these connections together, is when I see the big difference.
Do you test for any environmental factors? Do you look at heavy metals, chemicals, molds, those kind of things?
I do. Yeah. So I do look at, another thing we do, like we know like cadmium and lead, and there's different heavy metals that can play a role. And interesting, with the lead, I think this is another like interesting component for people, because you think of like, oh, I might not be exposed right now. You might be in a clean environment, but we can also look at our total life exposure. And sometimes, you could have been exposed to lead paint as a child potentially, and that lead has been stored in your bones. And then when you're going through these hormonal changes, your bone density changes, and you could be releasing some of this now later in life. And you might not know it. It's surprising because you're not even putting that connection together. So we have to really dig into the different layers. And so sometimes it's like we start at the top, then it's like, okay, here are the basics. You can look at those basics. Can you change those and feel better? Okay. And then we go down a layer, and then we look at, those layers. And then we keep going down until we find the real root. And one of those aspects is those heavy metals, and then mold toxicity. It can be huge for people, and that definitely can play a role in headaches. So if you're, that's one of the things we would look at, especially think about if your headaches, did it start when you moved into your environment? Is it better when you go away? Are you better or are you worse? You can look at different environments and see sometimes how you're feeling in different places in your life or times in your life, and start to put some of those pieces together too.
Yeah, so I've noticed with mold, it's not just headaches. It's also looking at the collection of symptoms that you're
Yeah.
getting. Like if you've got mold in your bedroom, you're more than likely waking during the night. You're more than likely having night sweats, as well as the headaches, possibly some sinus issues, some energy issues. It's the collection of
Yes.
accompanying symptoms that make you go, this sounds
Yes.
like mold. Time
Yeah.
to get someone to come and inspect it. But mold has
Yeah.
been such a big issue here in Australia. We have had so many floods this year, and it's something that I want to bring an awareness to, especially.
Hmm.
I'm sure it's not just Australia. I'm sure it's worldwide that it's a problem. But I do see women come to see me and going, I'm really struggling with night sweats. Okay, let's check out your bedroom. What's going on? And it's been mold.
Hmm.
So
Yes.
putting
And
those
we had our basement flood this year, and I was when they had to really take everything out, and they were saying like, "Oh, the damage." I was like, "I don't even care about the damage. I'm just terrified of like I'm just worried about the mold." Like so it can be a real problem if you're not able to get it handled correctly for your health. But it's also not the first like you're. I agree with what you're saying. So I don't go right to mold. Like someone comes to me with a headache, it's not like, oh, I think you have mold toxicity. That's a deeper layer. So, and the mold testing can be expensive. So it just tells you like, do you have mold? Do you not have mold toxicity? So it's not always the first place to start, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle to look into.
That's why you will always look at the cluster of symptoms.
Hmm.
Yes, to get started.
Yes.
Um, is there anything else that you assess that we haven't discussed today?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this is no one loves to talk about this, but stress, really looking at your cortisol because your stress, your adrenals can, when your cortisol is high, you can have an increased pain sensitivity. And, the thing is, pain is a stressor. So people that have chronic headaches are actually having biological stress. It's not just about your to-do list. There's actually biological stressors on your body. So, we can get stuck in this chain of pain where they're getting pain from getting stress from pain, which is causing more stress. And so really doing things that are calming your body down, that are bringing yourself back into the parasympathetic nervous system can be very impactful. So, deep breathing, if you're someone who meditates, or even gratitude journals, taking walks, anything that can really bring yourself back into that parasympathetic nervous system can be helpful.
I like that you mentioned some different lifestyle activities that women can do. I find it's good to empower them to take some action and give them some steps. So things like you mentioned, the walks, the deep breathing, these are all wonderful ideas. Is there any other lifestyle tips?
I think just making sure that you're sleeping well, that
Mm.
you're, getting good quality sleep, that you're really, to get your circadian rhythm in the right way, going in the right way, that you're staying hydrated. We all eating a clean, healthy diet is always, limiting sugars are also good. Getting movement is also something that can be helpful. So all those basic lifestyle things, putting them into place, and then really like starting, start with a calendar. If you don't notice, I have a guide that that I think I gave you the link, but we can get to that. It's just helpmyheadaches.com. You can start with 8 steps there that can get you started right away to, if you go to help my headaches, it's just helpmyheadaches.com. And then you can, move into deeper if you want some more thorough. I do offer free consultations too. So if you'd want like an assessment, we can, could do that, but just really looking into finding a practitioner that can help you and give you the guidance to navigate. And also, really taking the time. It's not the quick fix approach, but when you do these steps, we see that dramatic decrease in both incidence and severity. So long term, it's so beneficial, but it does take a little bit of time to discover all of these things and then really bring your body back into balance.
But when you look at the benefits, to actually get your life back, to live a pain-free life, to have clear head, that is priceless.
It is. And yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things, I had a patient say, I just don't wake up wondering if it's going to be a headache day. And I was like, it's such a simple but powerful way to describe it because, you live in that, like, is today going to be a headache day? Is it going to ruin my day? You're living with this all the time. And so just to not even have that as a factor is really life changing.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. You've given the listeners so many different avenues to think about. How can we best find you? So you've mentioned your helpmyheadaches.com. Is that the best place
Yes.
to start, or do you have a different website or social media?
So my website is megmill.com, just megmill.com. And then I also have a podcast also called A Little Bit Healthier. And those are things you can do every day in your life to be healthier, and live a more healthier, vibrant life. And then I'm over on Instagram at Dr. Meg Mill. It's just DrMegmill. And then the guide, you can just go, if you go to that helpmyheadaches.com, that's going to take you right to that guide. So if you'd like to download the guide, you can find it there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And wishing you a wonderful day.
You too. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.